March 1917. The wooden porch creaked under the weight of two men, one old and weathered as the mountains themselves, the other young and uncertain as spring rain. Cole Mercer sat in his rocking chair, 73 years, pressing down on shoulders that had carried heavier burdens. Beside him stood James, his grandson, 19 years old and 3 days away from boarding a train that would take him to a war across an ocean he had never seen. The boy wore his new uniform like a question he did not know how to answer. His hands worked at the brim of his cap, turning it over and over, the way young men do when they are afraid but trying not to show it. The valley below them stretched out in shades of gold and amber, Cathedral Ridge, standing sentinel against the fading light. Somewhere down there, hidden beneath 30 years of overgrowth, lay the charred foundation of another house, another life. "Grandpa," James said, his voice catching on the word like it always did when he wanted to sound brave. "Were you scared when you had to face 50 men who wanted to kill you?" Cole stopped rocking, his hands gnarled now with age but still strong, still steady, rested on the arms of his chair. He looked at his grandson and saw not the uniform, but the boy underneath, the same boy who used to chase fireflies in this very yard, who cried when his dog died, who asked too many questions and never settled for easy answers. "Sit down, son," Cole said. "Let me tell you about the last day." James sat folding his long legs beneath him, like he used to do as a child, and Cole felt time collapse in on itself the way it does when you get old enough to see the patterns repeat. The grandson waiting to go to war, the grandfather remembering his own battles, the unbroken line of men choosing to stand when running would be easier. "Not my last day," Cole continued, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades. "Your grandmother's last day, before I saved her from the gallows." He watched understanding bloom across James's face. The boy knew pieces of the story, fragments passed down through family dinners and whispered conversations. But he had never heard it like this, never heard it from the man who lived it. "It was February 1887. I was 43 years old, dead inside for 5 years. Then a 7-year-old girl grabbed my coat and whispered the words that changed everything." Cole closed his eyes and the years fell away like leaves in autumn. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, grown younger somehow, carrying him back to that morning when the noose swung empty in the wind and he rode into Cedar Ridge for the last time as a man with nothing left to lose. "Today is my mommy's last day alive," the child had said. "Please, mister, please help her." Act 1, the rope waits. The noose swung empty in the wind waiting. Cole Mercer had come to Cedar Ridge for a cow, not a killing. But the crowd's bloodlust hit him like desert heat the moment his horse crested the final hill. The sky hung low and colorless, pressed down by weeks without rain, and the creek that gave the town its name had gone bone dry, leaving only white stones and the skeletal remains of last year's cattails. His horse picked its way through the rutted Main Street head low with exhaustion, while Cole himself sat straight-backed in the saddle despite 43 years of sun and sorrow, etching lines into his face deep enough to plant seeds in. He had money in his pockets, 3 months of savings scraped together from trap lines and the last of his grain stores. $8.30. Enough for a milk cow, maybe a breeding heifer if the price was fair. Enough to keep a man going when going was all he had left. The town square should have been market day. Farmers with their wagons circled up, wives selling butter and eggs, children chasing chickens between the wheels. The easy chaos of commerce and community. Instead, Cole found a crowd, 200 souls or more, packed shoulder to shoulder around a hastily built platform in the center of the square. The scaffold stood raw and yellow, its pines still weeping sap in the weak sunlight. A hanging, Cole's jaw tightened, muscle working beneath skin gone leather, tough from exposure. He had been a lawman, once deputy to Judge Harrison for near on 8 years, and he had seen enough rope justice to last 3 lifetimes. That life was behind him now, buried with his wife and daughter in the little cemetery plot that overlooked his empty house. These days he kept to himself, spoke to no one, wanted nothing from Cedar Ridge but supplies and solitude. He should have turned his horse around right then. "Make way, prisoner coming through." The crowd parted like a wound opening. 2 men in deputy badges, boys really neither older than 25, dragged a woman between them. She could barely walk. Her feet scraped trenches in the dust as they hauled her forward, and her dark hair hung in matted ropes across a face so bruised it looked like someone had used it for target practice. Her wrists were bound so tight the rope had cut bloody grooves in her skin, and when the sunlight caught her at just the right angle, Cole could see the tremor running through her hands like electricity through wire. His hand moved instinctively to his hip, finding empty leather where his gun belt used to ride. He had sold his guns 2 winters back, when the hunger got bad enough that pride seemed like a luxury he could no longer afford. Now he wore nothing but a skinning knife on his belt and the weight of old instincts that never quite died no matter how hard you tried to bury them. "That's Grace Miller," someone near him muttered, voice dripping with the kind of satisfaction people get from watching someone lower than themselves get what's coming. Widow woman came up from the territories 3 years back, been squatting in the old Sutton bunkhouse with her bastard daughter. "Killed Henry Sutton, she did," another voice added, this one belonging to a shopkeeper Cole vaguely recognized. "Beat him to death with a fireplace poker. Stole 2 head of cattle and tried to run. String her up and be done with it," a woman spat. Her face twisted with something that looked like righteousness but smelled like cruelty. "We got enough problems without harboring murderers." Cole watched them haul Grace Miller up the scaffold steps. She stumbled twice, and the second time one of the young deputies kicked her in the small of the back to keep her moving. A few people in the crowd cheered. Most just watched with the grim satisfaction of folks who had found someone lower than themselves to look down on. At the top of the platform stood Mayor William Harlan, dressed in his Sunday clothes despite it being Thursday. Harlan was a big man, prosperous-looking, with silver hair swept back from a face that was all practiced sympathy and calculated concern. He held a sheet of paper that fluttered in the hot wind like a bird trying to escape. "Good people of Cedar Ridge," Harlan began, his voice carrying across the square with the ease of long practice. "We are gathered here in the sight of God and law to carry out the sentence of death upon Grace Miller, convicted by jury and counsel of the murder of Henry Sutton and the theft of property belonging to this community." Grace lifted her head. Even from 30 yards away, Cole could see the bruises that mottled her face like storm clouds. One eye was swollen completely shut, the flesh around it gone purple and yellow and sick. Her lips were split, encrusted with dried blood. She swayed on her feet, and for a moment Cole thought she might faint before they could hang her, which would rob the crowd of its spectacle. "Do you have any last words?" Harlan asked, his voice dripping with false mercy, the kind that costs nothing and means less. Grace's mouth moved. No sound came out at first. She tried again, and this time Cole heard it, a whisper that might have been Emma or might have been innocent. It did not matter. The crowd had already decided. One of the deputies fitted the noose around her neck. The rough hemp scraped against her throat, and she flinched but did not cry out. Cole noticed her hands were shaking, a fine tremor that ran from her fingertips up her arms. Not fear, he thought. Something else. Sickness, maybe. Poison, though he did not know it yet. Cole had seen enough. He did not know this woman, did not care about her crimes or her innocence. The world was full of suffering, and he had stopped believing he could fix any of it the day he buried his family. His wife Margaret, who used to sing while she cooked. His daughter Sarah, who had his stubborn chin and her mother's kind eyes. Both of them gone to ash in memory while he was off chasing rustlers who did not matter, playing at being a lawman when he should have been home protecting what was his. He turned his horse ready to leave this ugliness behind and find his cattle elsewhere. That is when he felt the tug on his coat. He looked down and saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, stick-thin and barefoot despite the cold snap that had come through the night before. She wore a dress that had been mended so many times it was more patched than original cloth, and her face was tear-streaked, her eyes huge and dark and desperate, in the way that only children's eyes can be when they know the adults have stopped listening. "Mister," she whispered, her tiny hand still clutching the tail of his duster. "Mister, please." Cole's breath caught in his chest. For one terrible moment he saw another little girl, another face staring up at him with trust he had not earned. Sarah. His Sarah. With her mother's eyes and his stubborn chin, asking him to fix something, save something, make the world right again the way children believe fathers can. "Please, mister," the child repeated, and her voice cracked on the words like ice breaking. "It's my mommy's last day alive." The words hit Cole like a fist to the gut. The noise of the crowd faded to a distant roar. The scaffold, the rope, the woman waiting to die, all of it narrowed down to this single point, a child's hand on his coat, and the words, "last day alive," hanging in the air between them like smoke. He tried to speak, but his throat had gone tight. Around them, the crowd roared his approval as the deputy positioned Grace Miller over the trapdoor. The hangman's lever waited gleaming in the sunlight. That's your mother. Cole managed his voice rough as gravel scraped across stone. The little girl nodded frantically, words tumbling out in a breathless rush. They say she killed Mr. Sutton, but she didn't. She wouldn't. She's been so sick, and they keep saying she's bad, but she's not bad. She's my mama. Please, mister. Please. The desperation in her voice was the kind that comes when a child knows the adults have stopped listening, have already made up their minds, have decided that some lives do not matter as much as others. I can't, Cole said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were a lie. His hand was already moving to the inside pocket of his coat, to the thing he had kept there for 5 years, even though he had sworn he would never use it again. The old deputy badge was tarnished now, its silver gone gray, green with age and neglect, but the words were still readable. Deputy District 7. It had been his father's before it was his, and it had been Cole's before he threw it down on Judge Harrison's desk, the day after the fire, the day after he buried his wife and daughter, and whatever piece of himself had still believed in justice. Please, the little girl whispered one more time. On the scaffold, the deputy reached for the lever that would spring the trap. Cole's hand closed around the badge. He did not remember spurring his horse forward. One moment he was at the edge of the crowd, the next he was pushing through the mass of bodies, his voice cutting across the square like a whip crack. Hold that execution. The crowd went silent. 200 faces turned toward him, confusion shifting to anger, shifting to recognition as they placed him. Cole Mercer. Used to be somebody. Now just another broken-down rancher with more land than sense, and nothing to show for his years but scars and empty rooms. The deputy's hand froze on the lever. Mayor Harlan's practiced smile slipped just for a moment before sliding back into place, like a mask that did not quite fit anymore. Cole Mercer, Harlan said, surprise coloring his voice with something that might have been genuine if you did not know to look for the calculation underneath. I didn't know you were in town today. I said, Cole repeated, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd like a blade. Hold that execution. His horse climbed the steps of the scaffold, 3 wooden planks that groaned under the animal's weight, but held. Cole reached the platform and dismounted in one smooth motion, then walked to where Grace Miller stood with the noose around her neck, the rope already beginning to chafe against skin gone raw and tender. Up close, she looked even worse. Her one good eye tracked to him, and he saw something there beyond fear, beyond pain, a terrible, exhausted resignation. She had already died inside. They were just finishing the job. Mr. Mercer, Harlan said carefully, his voice taking on that reasonable tone men use when they think they are dealing with someone who has lost their mind. I understand you used to wear a badge, but that was years ago. You have no authority here. Cole pulled out the tarnished star and held it up so the whole town could see the silver catching what little sunlight managed to break through the clouds. Says here I'm a deputy of District 7, he said, his voice level and cold as January creek water. Never resigned official, never got stripped of authority. That makes me law in this territory, and the law says a condemned prisoner gets a review of evidence before execution. We had a trial, one of the young deputies protested, his voice cracking with youth and indignation. Full jury and everything? When? Cole's question cut like a knife. Yesterday? One day, Cole's voice could have cut stone. You arrested her, tried her, and convicted her in one day. We had witnesses, Harlan interjected smoothly, already working to regain control of the narrative. Henry Sutton's housekeeper saw the whole thing. Grace came to the house demanding money, and when Mr. Sutton refused, she attacked him with a fireplace poker, beat him until he stopped breathing. The woman is clearly guilty. Cole looked at Grace. Her cracked lips moved, trying to form words. Is that true? He asked her, his voice gentler than it had been in 5 years. I don't remember, she whispered, and even that small effort seemed to cost her everything. I was there, but everything went dark. When I woke up, there was blood, and they were dragging me away. Convenient, someone in the crowd shouted. Murderer claims she don't remember. String her up. The mob's voice rose again, hungry for its entertainment, desperate for the satisfaction of watching someone lower than themselves swing. Cole felt their anger like heat from a furnace. These were desperate people. Drought had ruined crops. Winter would be hard. They needed someone to blame, someone to punish, someone lower than themselves to look down on and feel righteous about destroying. He reached up and loosened the noose from Grace's neck. She gasped and nearly fell, but he caught her. She weighed almost nothing, her body light as kindling and just as fragile. The fever coming off her skin was enough to scorch. "What are you doing?" Harlan demanded, his composure finally beginning to crack at the edges. "My job," Cole said simply. He lifted Grace in his arms like she was a child, like she weighed nothing at all. "This woman needs a doctor, not a rope. She needs justice." The shout came from somewhere in the crowd, anonymous and angry. "Then she'll get it." Cole's voice rang across the square, carrying to every corner, reaching every ear. "But it'll be real justice, not mob vengeance. I'm taking her into protective custody pending a proper investigation. Anyone who's got a problem with that can take it up with the territorial court." He started down the scaffold steps with Grace in his arms. The crowd parted again, but this time the silence was hostile, thick with barely contained violence. Cole felt eyes on his back, knew that half the men in Cedar Ridge probably had rifles in their wagons, knew that he was signing something that might be his own death warrant. At the bottom of the steps, the little girl waited. Emma. Grace had whispered the name as Cole loosened the rope. The child's face was alight with desperate hope, tears streaming down her cheeks as she looked up at her mother. "Is my mama okay?" "She will be," Cole said, though he was not sure if he was lying or not. "You come with me, both of you." He settled Grace on his horse, then lifted Emma up behind her. The child wrapped her thin arms around her mother's waist, holding tight like she would never let go, and something in Cole's chest that had been frozen solid for 5 years cracked just a little bit. He took the reins and began walking, leading his horse through the crowd, toward the edge of town, toward the hills and the valley beyond, where his empty house waited. "Cole Mercer," Harlan's voice followed him like a curse. "You're making a mistake. That woman is a killer, and you're signing your own death warrant by protecting her." Cole did not turn around, did not acknowledge the threat, just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, the way you do when there is nothing left but forward. "Then I'll die doing the right thing," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Been a while since I could say that." He could feel the town's rage like heat on the back of his neck as he led his horse down Main Street. No one moved to stop him. Not yet. But Cole knew it was only a matter of time. These people wanted blood, and he had just stolen their sacrifice. The ride to his ranch took 2 hours. The road was rough, the sun climbing toward its zenith, and Grace drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes muttering in Spanish, sometimes silent as death. Emma held her mother and cried quietly, the kind of crying a child learns when crying out loud does not help anymore. Cole's ranch sat in a pocket valley between Cathedral Ridge and Widow's Peak, 8 miles of bad road from the nearest neighbor. The house was small, 2 rooms and a loft with a barn that leaned to one side and a corral fence that needed mending. He had not bothered with repairs since the place looked as tired and worn down as he felt. He helped Grace down from the horse and carried her inside. The house was cold. He had let the fire die before leaving that morning, but at least it was clean. Some habits died hard. He laid Grace on his bed, the only real bed in the house, while Emma hovered beside him like a small ghost. "Is there firewood?" he asked the girl. Emma nodded, her voice small. "I can help." Together they built up the fire in the stone hearth until warmth began to seep back into the room. Cole fetched water from the well and set it to heat, then found clean rags that had once been his wife's good tablecloth. When the water was warm, he handed the rags to Emma. "Clean your mother's face," he said gently. "I need to look at her wounds." While Emma worked with a carefulness that broke his heart, Cole examined Grace more closely. The bruises on her face were days old, already yellowing at the edges. But there were fresh marks too. Rope burns on her wrists, a gash across her ribs that was starting to fester. Someone had worked her over good, but it was the tremor in her hands that worried him most. And the fever. And the way her breathing came shallow and quick, like she could not quite get enough air. "Mr. Cole," Emma's voice was small and certain. "Call me Cole." "Mr. Cole," she said again, because some children cannot help but be polite even when the world is ending. "Will they come for her, the men from town?" He should have lied, should have told the child everything would be fine, that the law would protect them, that justice would prevail. But Cole had never been good at lying, and the child deserved better. "Probably," he said, But I won't let them take her. Not until we figure out what really happened. She didn't kill Mr. Sutton. Emma's voice was fierce despite her size. Mama doesn't hurt nobody. Grace stirred, then her cracked lips moving. Emma was there instantly, taking her mother's hand. I'm here, Mama. We're safe. This man helped us. Grace's one good eye open, focusing on Cole with difficulty. Why? The word came out as a rasp, barely audible. It was a fair question. Cole did not have a good answer. Because your daughter looked at me like my daughter used to. Because I'm tired of watching the world grind up the weak. Because I've got nothing left to lose. And maybe saving you will finally balance the scales for the ones I couldn't save. Don't know yet, he said instead. But you're here now, and I don't let go of things I've taken charge of. That's just how I'm built. Grace's eye closed again. I'm dying, she whispered, and the certainty in her voice made Cole's blood run cold. Can feel it. The poison. Cole's breath stopped. What poison? The tea. Her words came slower now, consciousness slipping away again, like water through cupped hands. Mayor Harlan brought me tea every day. Said he was being kind to the poor widow. After a week, I started to forget things. Started seeing dark spots. Hands won't stop shaking. Her voice trailed off into silence, but Cole's mind was already working through the implications. If Grace had been poisoned, slowly and deliberately poisoned, then nothing about this made sense. You did not poison someone you planned to frame for murder. Unless you needed them confused, disoriented, unable to defend themselves or remember clearly. Unless you needed the town scared enough and angry enough to hang her quick before anyone could ask too many questions. Cole looked down at the woman in his bed and the child holding her hand. He had thought he was taking on a simple murder case, something straightforward enough that he could prove innocence or guilt and then wash his hands of the whole mess. Instead, he had just stumbled into something much darker. The sun was setting when Cole heard the riders coming up the valley road. He had been expecting them. You did not embarrass a man like Mayor Harlan in front of the whole town without consequences. He just had not expected them quite so soon. There were 6 of them, maybe 8. Cole watched from the window as they spread out in a loose semicircle around his house, staying just out of rifle range. Smart. They knew he had been a lawman, knew he could shoot. What they did not know was that he had sold his guns 2 years back. Emma, Cole said quietly, take your mother into the loft. Don't make a sound no matter what you hear. The girl's eyes went wide with fear, but she nodded. Together, they managed to get Grace up the ladder, her body limp and burning with fever. Cole settled them in the dark space under the eaves, then climbed back down. He stepped out onto his porch, closing the door behind him. The evening air was cold, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. The riders sat their horses like statues backlit by the dying sun. Cole Mercer. The voice belonged to Tom Brennan, one of Harlan's young deputies. We come for the prisoner. No prisoner here, Cole called back. Just a sick woman and her child. That woman is condemned. You got no right to interfere. I got every right. I'm still a sworn deputy, and I say she deserves a fair trial. She had a trial. She had a lynching with legal window dressing. There's a difference, Cole's voice carried across the darkening yard. Now you boys turn around and ride back to town. Tell Mayor Harlan that if he wants Grace Miller, he can come present his evidence to the territorial judge like the law requires. There was a long silence. Then another rider moved forward, not Brennan this time, but Jack Sutton, who owned the feed store and sat on the town council. Cole had bought supplies from him for years. Allow him, Sutton said, his voice reasonable, almost kind. You're putting yourself in a bad position here. The whole town saw what you did. You can't fight all of us. Won't have to fight anybody if you all just go home. That woman killed my brother in cold blood. The housekeeper saw the whole thing. There's no question about her guilt. Then there won't be no problem when the territorial judge looks at the evidence. Cole shifted his stance slightly, making sure they could see he was unarmed. I'm not looking for trouble, Jack. Just want to make sure justice gets done right. You want to know what real justice looks like, Cole continued. It looks like patience, investigation, evidence that can stand up to scrutiny, not a scared mob looking for someone to hurt. We got evidence, Brennan shouted. We got an eyewitness. One witness, Cole countered, who works for a man who had reason to want Grace Miller dead. You ever ask why Mayor Harlan was so eager to see her hang? The silence that followed was different this time. Uncertain. Questioning. Cole pressed his advantage. Grace Miller told me something interesting before she passed out, he said, letting his voice carry to every man there. She told me Mayor Harlan had been bringing her tea every day for a week, said he was being charitable to a poor widow. But after that week, she started getting sick, started losing her memory, started having blackouts. He paused, letting that sink in. From where I'm standing, it looks like someone wanted Grace confused and sick and unable to defend herself. Wanted her just conscious enough to take the blame for Sutton's murder, but too far gone to tell anyone what really happened. You're saying the mayor poisoned her? Brennan's laugh was forced nervous. That's crazy talk. Maybe, Cole shrugged, or maybe it's the truth. Either way, I'm going to find out, and I'm going to do it the right way with evidence and investigation and a proper trial. You got a problem with that? You're welcome to take it up with Judge Harrison when he makes his circuit next month. The riders shifted uneasily. Cole could see the doubt spreading among them like a stain. They had come out here expecting to overwhelm a lone man and take back their prisoner. Instead, they were being asked to think, to question, to consider that maybe, just maybe, they had been played. "Oh," Sutton said, finally his voice tired, "the mayor ain't going to like this." "Then the mayor can come talk to me himself man to man. But he better come with evidence, not a rope." The riders stayed for another few minutes, their horses stamping and blowing in the cold. But the moment had passed. Whatever blood fury had driven them out here was cooling in the face of Cole's stubborn certainty. One by one, they turned their horses and rode back down the valley road. Tom Brennan was last to leave, and as he went, he called back one final warning. "You're a dead man, Mercer. You just don't know it yet." Cole watched until the last rider disappeared into the gathering dark. Then he went inside and barred the door. Emma climbed down from the loft, her face pale in the firelight. "Are they gone?" "For now," Cole moved to the window watching the road. "But they'll be back, and next time they'll bring more men." "What are we going to do?" Cole looked at the child, this small, fierce thing who had grabbed his coat and changed everything. "We're going to prove your mama's innocent, and we're going to find out who really killed Henry Sutton." "How?" "By doing what I should have done 15 years ago when I was a lawman, by following the evidence wherever it leads, no matter who it points to." Emma nodded, her face serious beyond her years. "I can help. I remember things. Things from before Mama got sick." "Then you and me are going to have a long talk in the morning," Cole said. "But tonight you need to rest, both of you." He helped Emma make a bed for herself near the fire, then checked on Grace one more time. Her fever had broken slightly, but the tremor in her hands remained. He would need to get her to Doc Ellis in Silverton, 20 miles north. But not tonight. Tonight they would stay put, stay armed, and pray that Mayor Harlan was not quite ready to send assassins to a sworn deputy's home. Cole settled into his chair by the window, the old deputy badge heavy on his chest. Outside, the coyotes sang to the stars and the wind carried the scent of coming snow. Somewhere in Cedar Ridge, a guilty man was probably sleeping soundly in his comfortable bed, confident that his sins would stay buried. But Cole Mercer had pulled on his badge again after 5 years. And that meant something. It meant he would see this through to the end, whatever that end might be. It meant he would stand between this woman and child and the mob's hunger for blood. It meant he had finally stopped running from the ghosts of his past and started fighting back. He just hoped he remembered how. In the loft above, Grace whispered in her fever dreams fragments in Spanish and English, pieces of memory that Cole could not quite catch. But one phrase came through clear as a bell, repeated over and over like a prayer or a curse. He said I could trust him. He said he would help us. He brought me tea and kindness and death. Cole's jaw tightened. In the morning, he would start asking questions. He would find witnesses, track evidence, piece together what really happened in Henry Sutton's house 3 days ago. He would follow the trail until it led him to the truth. And if that truth pointed to Mayor William Harlan, to a man who had poisoned a widow, framed her for murder, and nearly hanged her in front of her child, then Cole would see him brought to justice if it was the last thing he ever did. The night deepened. The fire burned low. And in a small house in a lonely valley, 3 souls waited for the dawn and whatever it might bring. Outside, the gallows in Cedar Ridge stood empty, But not for long. The first light came cold and gray through the window, turning the frost on the glass into something that looked like broken lace. Cole had not slept. He had spent the night in his chair watching the road and listening to Grace's labored breathing from the loft above. Every hour he had climbed up to check on her, dampening her forehead with cool water, making sure the fever had not spiked again. Emma slept curled against her mother like a small animal seeking warmth, and each time Cole looked at them, something twisted in his chest that he had thought dead years ago. The coffee was bitter and strong when he finally got it going, made from grounds he had already used twice before. He was down to his last supplies. Maybe 2 weeks of flour, some dried beans, a little salt pork that was more salt than pork. Taking on Grace and Emma meant 3 mouths instead of one, and winter was coming on fast. But that was a problem for another day. Right now he needed to think about evidence and witnesses and how to keep a determined mayor from finishing what he had started. Emma climbed down the ladder just after sunrise, moving quietly so as not to wake her mother. Her face was pinched with worry and lack of sleep, but she came to stand by Cole's chair without being asked, her small presence oddly comforting. "Is Mama any better?" she whispered on. "Some. The fever's down a touch. She's strong, your mama. Stronger than most would be after what she's been through." Emma nodded, then looked up at him with those two old eyes. "You said we'd talk about what I remember." Cole poured her a cup of milk, the last of what he had, and settled her in the other chair. "Tell me about 3 days ago, the day Mr. Sutton died." The girl's face went pale, but she did not look away. Morning time, Mayor Harlan came. He brought Mama tea like he'd been doing all week. Mama drank it because it seemed rude not to. He was the mayor and all. After he left, Mama said she needed to go to the main house. Mr. Sutton sent word he wanted to see her. Emma's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I begged her not to go. I had a bad feeling, you know. But we needed the money." "What time did she leave?" "Around noon. She said she'd be back before dark. But when the sun started going down and she wasn't home, I got scared. I snuck up to the big house and looked in the windows." Cole leaned forward. "What did you see?" "Nothing at first, but then I heard shouting. Mr. Sutton's voice real angry, and Mama crying. She was saying, 'Please, I can't, I won't,' over and over. Tears started tracking down the child's cheeks, but her voice stayed steady. Then there was a crash like something breaking, and Mama screamed. Did you see what happened?" Emma shook her head. "I was too scared. I ran back to the bunkhouse and hid. A couple hours later, men came with torches. They dragged Mama out and said she'd killed Mr. Sutton. They were so rough with her, Mr. Cole. She couldn't even stand upright, and they just kept dragging her through the dirt." "And the mayor, was he there?" "Yes, sir. He was the one in charge. He kept saying how terrible it was, how Mama had betrayed his kindness, how justice needed to be swift." Emma looked up at him with a clarity that was almost frightening. "But Mr. Cole, he was smiling, just a little bit where most people couldn't see. But I saw. He was happy this was happening." Cole sat back, his mind working through the pieces. A man brings a woman poisoned tea for a week, weakening her mind and body. Then he sends her to another man's house, a man who had been abusing her. Something goes wrong. The abuser ends up dead, and the woman is too sick and confused to defend herself properly. Then the same man who'd brought the poison leads the charge for a quick hanging before anyone can ask too many questions. It fit together too neatly to be coincidence, but proving it was another matter entirely. "Emma," he said gently, "did your mama ever talk about the mayor, about why he was being so kind to her?" "Once. She said he told her that Mr. Sutton owed him money, a lot of money, and that if anything ever happened to Mr. Sutton, the mayor would make sure we were taken care of." Emma's eyes widened with sudden understanding. Mama thought he was just being nice, planning ahead, but now it sounds like he was setting up a person to take the fall. Cole stood and moved to the window, checking the road again out of habit. Mr. Sutton dies, his debts die with him, and the mayor gets a convenient scapegoat to blame it on. Clean and simple. "But Mama didn't do it," Emma said fiercely. "Even if she was sick and confused, she wouldn't kill nobody." "She's not like that." "I believe you, little one. But believing and proving are two different animals." A sound from the loft made them both look up. Grace was awake, her voice rough but stronger than last night. "Water, please." Cole climbed the ladder with a cup, helping her sit up enough to drink. In the morning light, he could see her more clearly. She was younger than he had first thought, maybe 30 at most, with fine features that would have been pretty if half her face was not bruised to hell. Her hand still shook as she held the cup, but her one good eye focused on him with sharp intelligence. "You're the man from the gallows," she said. "Cole Mercer. And before you thank me, you should know I'm not sure yet if I did you a favor. The whole town wants you dead, and I've just made myself the target standing between you and them." "Then why did you do it?" Cole looked down at Emma, who had followed him up the ladder and now sat holding her mother's hand. "Because your daughter asked me to. And because I've spent 5 years running from everything that mattered. Figured it was time to stop." Grace's eye closed briefly, and when it opened again, there were tears tracking through the bruises. "I didn't kill him. I swear on my daughter's life, I didn't kill Henry Sutton." "Tell me what you do remember." She took a shaky breath. "I'd been feeling wrong for days. Dizzy, forgetful. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The mayor said it was just the stress of poverty that I needed to eat better. He brought me tea with honey, said it would help settle my nerves." "Did the sickness start before or after he brought the tea?" Grace's brow furrowed. "After, I think. Yes, after. The first cup he brought, I felt strange within the hour, but I thought I was just tired." "Go on." "Henry Mr. Sutton sent word he needed to see me. I went to the main house like always, but this time was different. He'd been drinking. I could smell it. And he was angry about something." Her voice broke and Emma squeezed her hand tighter. "He started talking about how ungrateful I was, how he'd given me a place to live, and I'd given him nothing in return. He grabbed me, tore my dress. I tried to fight, but I was so weak. Everything was spinning." Grace's breathing quickened with the memory. Then suddenly there was someone else there, another man. I couldn't see his face clearly. Everything was going dark. But I heard arguing, heard Henry say something about money and threats. Then there was a sound like a watermelon hitting the ground. And I don't remember anything else until I woke up in a cell with blood all over my clothes and everyone saying I'd killed him. "The other man," Cole pressed. "Did you recognize his voice?" "Maybe. It was familiar, but my head was so foggy I can't be sure." Cole climbed back down the ladder, his mind racing. Two men arguing about money, a convenient blackout, and a woman too poisoned to remember the truth. He needed more than Grace's fractured memory. He needed physical evidence. "I'm going back to the Sutton place," he announced. "Have a look around before the mayor can clean up whatever trail he's left." Emma's face went pale. "But they'll be watching for you." "They'll be watching the road and the front approach. But I know another way." He looked at Grace. "You stay here and rest. Bar the door after I leave and don't open it for anyone but me. I'll knock 3 times, pause, then twice more. Anyone comes with a different knock, you take Emma and hide in the root cellar out back." "Mr. Mercer," Grace said softly from the loft. "Why are you doing this? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." Cole pulled on his coat and settled his hat. "Maybe not, but I owe something to myself. Been walking around like a dead man for 5 years. Your daughter reminded me I'm still breathing, and breathing men have obligations." He was out the door before Grace could respond, taking the back trail that wound through the pine forest toward the Sutton Ranch. It was a hard 3-hour walk, steep and cold, but it would bring him up behind the property where no one would be watching. The Sutton place sat on 200 acres of good grazing land, with a main house that was too big for one man, and a collection of outbuildings that spoke of better days when the ranch had been prosperous. Now it had a neglected look, fences sagging, barn doors hanging crooked, the kind of slow decay that happens when a man stops caring about anything but his own appetites. Cole approached from the tree line, moving slow and careful. There was a deputy posted at the front, young Tom Brennan, looking cold and bored. But no one watching the back. Sloppy. In Cole's day as a lawman, a crime scene meant a full perimeter. But then in his day, they had actually cared about finding the truth. He slipped through a broken window into what looked like a study. Papers were scattered everywhere, as if someone had been searching frantically. Cole moved through them carefully, bills mostly and all of them overdue. Henry Sutton had been drowning in debt. There were letters from creditors, threats of foreclosure, demands for payment. And there near the bottom of the pile, a document that made Cole's blood run cold. It was a promissory note dated 3 months back. Henry Sutton had borrowed $5,000 from William Harlan to cover gambling debts. The note specified repayment within 90 days, with Sutton's ranch as collateral in case of default. The 90 days were up tomorrow. Cole folded the note and tucked it inside his coat. Then he moved deeper into the house toward the parlor where Sutton had died. Someone had cleaned up some, but not well. There were still dark stains on the floorboards where blood had pooled. The fireplace poker lay on the mantel cleaned, but Cole could see traces of rust-colored residue in the decorative grooves. He examined the poker carefully, then set it aside. It was too light, too flimsy. A woman Grace's size, weakened by poison, could not have generated enough force with that poker to kill a man Sutton's size with a single blow. But a strong man could have. Cole circled the room looking for anything the deputies might have missed. Under an overturned chair, he found it. A belt. Fine leather with a distinctive snakehead buckle done in silver. The belt was too expensive for a ranch hand, too fancy for a farmer. It was the kind of thing a prosperous man might wear. A man like a mayor. He picked it up, feeling the quality of the leather. There was a dark stain on one edge that might have been blood, and when he looked at the silver snake more closely, he saw two tiny initials engraved on the underside. W.H. William Harland. The front door opened. Cole froze, then moved quickly behind a heavy curtain as voices filled the house. "I don't care what Mercer thinks he's doing," Mayor Harlan was saying. "That woman hangs, and she hangs soon. Every day she's alive is another day people might start asking questions." "But boss," another voice, Tom Brennan, whined nervously, "Mercer's got the badge. The old judge will back him up if this gets to territorial court." "Then we make sure it doesn't get to court." Harlan's voice was cold as January ice. "Send word to the boys. I want 50 men ready to ride at sundown. We're going to pay Mr. Mercer a visit and finish what we started. You want us to kill a deputy. I want you to recover a prisoner who escaped lawful execution. If the deputy gets in the way, well, accidents happen, especially to men living alone in isolated places." There was a pause, and then Harlan's voice dropped even lower, thick with malice. "And make sure the fire burns hot enough that there's nothing left to question afterward." "What about the kid?" Brennan asked. "What about her?" "She's just a little girl. She don't deserve—" "She's a witness," Harlan cut him off, "and witnesses can be problematic." "You got a problem with that?" Tom's silence. Then quietly, "No, sir, no problem." Their footsteps retreated. Cole waited 5 full minutes before he moved, making sure they were truly gone. His heart was pounding, but not with fear, with rage. This man, this mayor who smiled and made speeches about justice, was planning to murder a child to cover his crimes. Cole slipped out the same window he had entered, the belt and promissory note tucked safely in his coat. He had evidence now. Not enough for a conviction maybe, but enough to make people think twice. Enough to buy time. But time was running out. Harlan was moving faster than Cole had expected. And now there was a deadline. Sundown. That gave him maybe 8 hours to gather more proof, get word to someone who could help, and somehow fortify his ranch against 50 armed men. He ran most of the way back, his bad knee screaming protest, but his body remembering how to push through pain. By the time he reached his valley, the sun was high and his lungs burned with cold air. Emma had the door barred like he had told her. She opened it at his special knock, her face flooding with relief when she saw him. "Did you find anything?" "More than I hoped for." Cole laid the belt and note on the table. Henry Sutton owed the mayor a fortune. Payment was due tomorrow. Harlan stood to lose everything if Sutton couldn't pay. But if Sutton turned up dead and someone else took the blame, then the mayor could take the ranch and nobody would question it. Emma, sharp as a tack, finished the thought. "So he poisoned Mama to make her confused, then sent her to Mr. Sutton's house when he knew something bad would happen. And this belt was at the murder scene," Cole said. "It's got the mayor's initials on it, and this note shows motive clear as day." Grace had managed to climb down from the loft and now sat wrapped in a blanket by the fire. "How do we prove it?" "This belt at the murder scene got the mayor's initials. This note shows motive. Question is, what do we do with it?" "Take it to the territorial marshal," Grace said. "Show him the evidence." "Marshal's in Silverton. That's a 20-mile ride through country. Harlan's men will be watching. Even if I made it, I couldn't get back with help before sundown." "That's when they're coming." The room went very quiet. Emma looked at her mother, then at Cole. How many are coming? 50 according to what I heard, maybe more. Grace whispered, 50 men. Against one. Against three, Emma said fiercely. I can shoot. Papa taught me before he died. Cole almost smiled, almost. I appreciate the offer, little one. But I sold my guns 2 years back. Got a shotgun and my hunting rifle left. Maybe 20 shells between them. We can make them think twice about charging straight in, but we can't hold off 50 men for long. Then what do we do? Grace's voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. We can't run. I can barely walk and they know this country better than we do. Cole moved to the window looking out at his land. The broken fence, the leaning barn, the little house that had been his prison and sanctuary for 5 long years. He had thought he was done fighting, thought he had lost everything worth protecting. But here he was again, backed into a corner with innocence depending on him. And he would be damned if he would let history repeat itself. We don't run, he said quietly, and we don't surrender. We do what I should have done 5 years ago. We stand our ground, and we make them pay for every inch. He turned back to face them. Emma, you know the old mine shaft up on Cathedral Ridge, the one with the cave in? The girl nodded. It's not safe to go deep, but the entrance is solid. If things go bad here, I want you and your mama to run for that mine. There's supplies cached there, water, food, blankets, old habit from my lawman days. You hide there until it's safe to come out or until the territorial marshal comes through on his rounds. What about you? Emma asked, her voice rising. I'll be here, buying you time to get away. That's crazy, Emma said. You can't fight 50 men by yourself. Won't be by myself. I'll have surprise position and the knowledge that I've got nothing left to lose. That counts for something. He knelt down so he was eye level with the girl. Listen to me, Emma. What's coming isn't going to be pretty. These men mean to kill everyone in this house and burn it to cover their tracks. Your mama's too weak to fight and you're too young to die. So when I say run, you run. You don't look back. You don't hesitate. You grab your mama and you run like hell for that mine. Can you do that for me? Emma's eyes were full of tears, but she nodded. Good girl. Cole straightened and looked at Grace. I'm going to write down everything I know and everything I've found. If I don't make it through tonight, you get that letter to the territorial marshal. Make sure he knows William Harlan is a murderer and a thief, and that he killed Henry Sutton to cover his debts. Cole, Grace said softly, thank you for everything. You're a good man. No, Cole said, his voice rough. I'm just a man who finally remembered how to do the right thing. Took me 5 years and a little girl pulling on my coat, but I got there eventually. He spent the afternoon preparing. There was not much he could do against 50 men, but he could make the approach hell. He moved his few precious shells into strategic positions around the house, set trip wires in the dark, filled bottles with lamp oil and stuffed them with rags. Poor man's grenades that might buy a few minutes. Every defensive trick he had learned in his years as a lawman came flooding back, and his hands moved with old confidence. Grace watched him work. Emma helped where she could. When the sun began its slide toward the western peaks, Cole gathered them both. It's time. They'll be here within the hour, soon as it's dark enough to hide their numbers. He helped Grace into her coat, wrapped Emma in an extra blanket. The walk to the mine would be hard on Grace in her weakened state, but it was better than staying to face what was coming. At the door, Emma turned back. Mr. Cole. Yes, little one. Promise me you'll try to get away. Promise me you won't just give up. Cole looked down at this fierce, brave child who had changed everything. I promise. Now go, fast as you can. He watched them disappear into the gathering darkness. Grace leaning on Emma's small shoulders, moving slower than he would have liked, but moving. When they were out of sight, he barred the door and took up his position by the window. The sun dropped below the mountains. Shadows pooled in the valley like spilled ink. And from the east, where the road came down from Cedar Ridge, he heard them coming. The sound of many horses, many men, all bent on murder under the cover of darkness. Cole checked his rifle one last time, then settled in to wait. His hands were steady. His breathing was calm. And for the first time in 5 years, Cole Mercer felt alive. They came like a dark tide rolling down the valley, torches bobbing in the twilight like malevolent stars. Cole counted them through the window. 47 riders, maybe more, trailing behind. more than he had expected. The mayor had called in men from the outlying ranches, promised them something worth the ride. Blood money, probably, or a share of Sutton's land once this was all settled. Cole's rifle rested across his knees, loaded with one of his precious few shells. The shotgun leaned against the wall within easy reach. Outside, his tripwires waited in the darkness, and the oil bottles sat ready on the windowsill. It was not much of a defense, but it would have to be enough. The riders stopped about 50 yards out, just beyond accurate rifle range. Smart. Someone out there knew what they were doing. Cole watched as a man rode forward alone, holding a white cloth tied to a stick. The torchlight caught his face. Mayor Harlan himself, dressed in his fine coat, like he was going to a church social instead of a murder. "Cole Mercer," Harlan's voice carried across the cold air. "I'm here under authority of the town council to retrieve a convicted prisoner. Send out Grace Miller, and we'll leave you in peace." Cole did not answer. Let them wonder if he was even inside. "Mercer, I know you are in there. Be reasonable about this. The woman killed a man in cold blood. Justice demands she pay for her crime." Still, Cole said nothing. He shifted his position slightly, getting a better angle on the riders behind Harlan. They were spreading out now, trying to encircle the house. At least a dozen had dismounted and were moving through the darkness on foot. "Last chance, Mercer. You're outnumbered and outgunned. There's no shame in stepping aside when the odds are against you." Cole stood, then moving to where they could see his silhouette in the window. "That's close enough, Harlan. You and your men turn around and ride back to town." "You know I can't do that." "Sure you can. You point your horses that way and you kick their sides. They'll figure out the rest." A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the assembled men. Harlan's face darkened. "You're protecting a murderess. A woman who beat Henry Sutton to death with a fireplace poker." "That's interesting," Cole called back. "Because I was at the crime scene today, had a good look around. You know what I found? The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. I found a belt, real nice leather, silver snake buckle, got the initials WH engraved on it. Now I wonder whose belt that might be." Even in the dim light, Cole could see Harlan's hand move instinctively to his waist. The mayor was not wearing a belt, probably had not even realized he had lost it in the struggle with Sutton. "I also found a promissory note," Cole continued. $5,000, payment due tomorrow. That's a lot of money for a rancher to owe a mayor. Makes a man wonder what might happen if that rancher couldn't pay. Makes a man wonder if maybe the mayor might want to arrange for that debt to disappear along with the debtor. "That's slander," Harlan said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "It's truth, and I've got the evidence to prove it. That belt puts you out of the murder scene, Harlan, and that note gives you motive clear as day. You killed Henry Sutton, then you poisoned Grace Miller and set her up to take the fall. How long had you been planning it? How many cups of poisoned tea did it take before she was confused enough to be your patsy?" Some of the riders were muttering now, looking at each other uncertainly. Cole pressed his advantage. "You all came out here thinking you were serving justice, but you're not. You're helping a murderer cover his tracks. Every man here who pulls a trigger tonight becomes an accomplice to murder. Is that what you want? Is that what you're willing to hang for?" For a moment, Cole thought he had them. Several riders were already turning their horses, doubt written clear on their faces. But then Harlan pulled his pistol and fired 3 shots in the air. "That man is harboring a convicted murderer," he shouted. "The council gave you all the authority you need. Now burn him out." The first bullet shattered the window glass above Cole's head. He dropped low, then brought his rifle up and fired once at the nearest torch. The man holding it screamed and dropped it, clutching his shoulder. The torch fell into dry grass and sputtered out. "Next man who raises a weapon dies," Cole shouted. "I'm a sworn deputy, and you're attacking a lawman in his home. That's a hanging offense for every last one of you." But they were committed now. Blood was in the water, and Harlan was screaming orders. Men ran forward with torches, aiming for the barn first. Cole fired again, missed, worked the bolt, and fired a third time. This bullet found its mark. A man went down clutching his leg, and his companions dragged him back. The barn caught fast, old dry wood going up like kindling. Flames licked 20 feet into the black sky, turning night into hellish day. By that light, Cole could see them all now. Men he had bought supplies from. Men whose children he had seen at the schoolhouse. Men who were about to murder him because it was easier than standing up to power. They rushed the house from three sides at once. Cole grabbed the shotgun and fired both barrels through the front door, heard screams, then fell back to the second window. His rifle cracked again and again until the magazine ran dry. He was down to maybe 6 shells left, and there were still 30 men out there. One of his tripwires caught 3 men at once, sending them sprawling. Another stumbled over the wire and discharged his weapon into his own foot. Small victories, but they would not be enough. The first oil bottle sailed through the broken window, trailing flame. Cole caught it before it hit the floor and threw it back out. It exploded against a rider's chest, and suddenly man and horse were screaming, wreathed in fire. The sight of it stopped the charge cold. Men fell back, beating at sparks on their clothes. "Jesus Christ," someone shouted. "He's crazy." "He's a dead man," Harlan screamed. "All of you forward. There's only one of him." But one man who knew what he was doing was worth more than 40 men who had never faced real violence. Cole kept moving, kept shooting, using every trick he had learned in 20 years of hard living. He fired from windows they were not expecting, through burning bottles that sent men diving for cover, reloaded in darkness, and counted his remaining shells with the part of his mind that stayed cold and calculating, even when everything else was chaos. Still, he was losing. The barn was gone, nothing but flaming wreckage now. The corral fence was burning, and they had managed to get torches against the house itself. He could smell smoke coming through the floorboards, could feel heat building in the walls. Time to go. Cole grabbed his rifle and the cloth bag he had prepared earlier, water, ammunition, the evidence against Harlan, and a few strips of dried meat. He kicked Bob in the back door and ran low through the smoke, making for the tree line. Bullets whined past his head like angry hornets. One tugged at his coat, another kicked up dirt at his feet. Behind him, his house, the place where he had lived with his family, where his wife had sung while cooking supper, where his daughter had taken her first steps, finally caught fully and began to roar like a living thing dying in agony. Cole hit the trees and kept running. He knew these woods had hunted them for 5 years. In darkness on familiar ground, he had the advantage. He could hear them crashing through the brush behind him, cursing and shouting. But they were city men and ranch hands, not trackers. They made noise like cattle, and in the forest noise meant death. He led them in a circle, doubling back on his own trail, then splitting off at a run toward the high country, toward Cathedral Ridge and the mine where Grace and Emma waited. He had to reach them before Harlan's men did, had to get them away from here, away from this valley that was burning with his past. The climb was brutal. His bad knees screamed with every step and his lungs burned from running and smoke. Behind him, the pursuit was spreading out, men calling to each other in the darkness. They had numbers and determination. But Cole had desperation, and desperation could carry a man further than he thought possible. Halfway up the ridge, snow began to fall. First just a few flakes dancing in the updraft from the burning valley below. Then more. Then a steady curtain of white that turned the world into a confusion of shadow and light. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many minutes. Men below started calling for retreat, their voices thin and frightened. But not all of them turned back. Cole could hear at least 5 still coming, spread out in a loose line, their breathing harsh in the cold air. One of them was close. Too close. Cole pressed himself against a boulder and waited, rifle ready. The man came into view, torch held, high pistol in his other hand. Young Tom Brennan, the deputy who had been guarding the crime scene. His face was soot-stained and scared, but he kept coming because Harlan had ordered it, and he did not know how to disobey. "Mercer," Brennan called out, "give it up. You can't run forever." Cole could have killed him. One shot from the darkness, and Brennan would never know what hit him. But the boy was maybe 23, maybe younger, and Cole had already killed enough young men in his life. So instead, he picked up a rock and threw it hard to the left. Brennan spun toward the sound and fired 3 wild shots. Cole used the noise to slip away, climbing higher. The mine entrance appeared out of the swirling snow like a mouth in the mountainside. Cole paused, listening. No sound from inside. He whistled softly. 3 short, 2 long. The signal he had taught Emma. For a terrible moment, there was no answer, and Cole's heart seized with the thought that maybe they had gotten lost. Maybe Grace had collapsed, maybe. Then Emma's whistle came back, perfect and clear. Cole slipped inside the mine shaft, past the warning signs about unstable rock, past the old support timbers that groaned in the wind. 20 yards in the shaft opened into a small chamber where he had cached his supplies years ago. Emma and Grace huddled there, wrapped in blankets, illuminated by a single candle that sent their shadows dancing across the stone walls. "Mr. Cole," Emma threw herself at him. He caught her, held her for just a moment before gently pushing her back. "We need to move deeper. They're still coming." Grace struggled to her feet, leaning heavily on the rock wall. She looked worse than ever. The climb had cost her what little strength she had regained, but her eyes were fierce and determined. "How many?" she asked. "5, maybe 6, still tracking us. The rest turned back when the snow hit. But Harlan won't give up. He's got too much to lose." "Then we make our stand here," Grace said. "I'm done running. Can't stand here. This entrance section isn't stable. But there's a side tunnel about 50 yards deeper. Opens into an old supply room. We can defend that, eh?" He helped Grace deeper into the mine, Emma carrying the candle ahead of them. The darkness pressed in like a living thing, and the air tasted of old stone and ancient water. Cole counted his steps, remembering the layout from when he had explored this place years ago. They had just reached the supply room when he heard voices at the mine entrance. Fresh tracks in the snow. They went in here. "Are you crazy? The sign says this place is ready to collapse." "Do I look like I care about a goddamn sign? Harlan wants them dead, and I ain't going back without something to show for tonight." Cole settled Grace and Emma in the deepest corner of the supply room, then took a position where the side tunnel met the main shaft. His rifle was down to 3 shells. 3 shots to stop 5 men. The arithmetic did not work in his favor. Light appeared in the main shaft torches, bobbing closer. Cole aimed carefully, sighting on the lead torch. If he could take out their light, they would be stumbling blind in a place where one wrong step could mean death. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then the mountain spoke. It started as a rumble, deep and low, like distant thunder, trapped in stone. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. The torches wavered as the men stopped, sudden fear in their voices. "What the hell was that? The whole goddamn mountain's coming down." The rumble grew louder. Timbers groaned and cracked. Somewhere deeper in the mine rock was shifting, settling, beginning the slow collapse that the warning signs had promised for years. The men with the torches turned and ran, their courage evaporating in the face of something they could not shoot or threaten. Cole waited, hardly breathing. The rumble continued for another 30 seconds, then slowly faded. Small stones continued to patter down from cracks in the ceiling, but the major collapse, if there was going to be one, had not happened yet. "Is it over?" Emma whispered from the darkness. "For now." Cole lowered his rifle. "But we can't stay here much longer. This whole section is unstable." "Then where do we go?" Grace's voice was weak. "Back down the mountain, they'll be waiting. Deeper into the mine, we might get trapped." Cole thought fast. There was another way out of this mine. A ventilation shaft that opened on the north face of the ridge. 200 yards of crawling through tight spaces where a man could barely fit. He had explored it once years ago, but never tried to climb it. With Grace in her current condition, it would be nearly impossible. But nearly impossible beat certain death. "There's another exit," he said. "It's going to be rough, and you're going to have to trust me. Can you do that?" Emma nodded immediately. Grace took longer, studying his face in the candlelight. Finally, she nodded too. "You've kept us alive this long. I suppose we can trust you a little longer." They gathered what they could carry: 1 blanket, the water Cole's bag of evidence. Everything else got left behind. Cole led them deeper into the mine, past chambers filled with old equipment and rusted rails, past places where the floor dropped away into darkness that smelled of cold earth and forgotten time. The ventilation shaft was exactly where he remembered it. A vertical chimney, maybe 3 feet across, cut through solid rock. Looking up, Cole could see stars through the opening far above. The distance looked impossible. "You're joking," Grace said when she saw it. "I'm not. It's this, or we wait here until Harlan works up the courage to come back with more men. I can't climb that. I can barely stand." Cole pulled rope from his bag, another item he had cached here years ago. "You don't have to climb. I'll pull you." "That's insane." "Probably, but it's all we've got." He went first, testing each handhold, making sure the shaft was still sound. The rock was rough and cold, biting into his fingers, even through his gloves. 20 feet up, he found a natural ledge and secured his rope. Then he climbed back down. "Emma first. Tie this around your waist. When I pull, use your hands and feet to keep yourself steady against the walls. Can you do that? The girl looked terrified, but nodded. Cole hauled her up, hand over hand, his arms burning with the effort. She was light, but the angle was awkward, and twice he nearly lost his grip. When he got her to the ledge, he tied off the rope and climbed up beside her. Stay here, I'm going back for your mama. Grace was harder. She tied the rope around her chest, but she was dead weight, unable to help with the climb. Cole pulled until his shoulders screamed, until his hands bled through his gloves, until he thought his arms would tear from their sockets. Inch by inch, she rose through the darkness. He was halfway up with her when he heard voices again in the mine below. They had come back, Harlan driving them forward with threats and promises. Torchlight flickered in the main shaft. Faster, Grace gasped. Leave me if you have to. Not a chance, Cole gritted his teeth and pulled harder. His vision started to gray at the edges from effort. The rope bit into his torn hands, but he did not stop, did not slow, did not let go. He got Grace to the ledge just as the first torch appeared in the chamber below. Someone shouted. They had been spotted. A gunshot cracked and the bullet whined off stone near Cole's head. Climb, he shouted at Emma. All the way to the top, fast as you can. The girl started scrambling up the shaft like a mountain goat, finding handholds that should not exist, moving with the fearless grace of the young. Cole tied a loop in the rope and put it around Grace's waist again, then started climbing with her weight hanging below him. More shots from below, but the angle was bad, and the darkness was nearly complete. They were shooting at sounds more than targets. Still, bullets ricocheted through the shaft, filling the air with rock, splinters, and the smell of hot metal. Cole's hand found the next hold and the next. His mind had gone to some distant place where there was no pain, no fear, just movement. Up, always up toward the stars and the cold air and the promise of survival. Emma reached the top and called down encouragement. Cole could see the opening now, maybe 30 feet above. His arms were numb. His bad knee had locked up completely. But he kept climbing, dragging Grace with him. And when his hand finally closed on the rim of the shaft and cold wind hit his face, he wanted to weep with relief. Emma helped pull her mother out, and together they dragged her away from the opening. Below, the voices were getting closer. Someone was starting up the shaft. Cole looked around desperately and found what he needed. A boulder roughly the size of a man's torso balanced precariously near the shaft's edge. He put his back against it and shoved. The boulder resisted, then suddenly rolled, gathering speed as it toppled into the ventilation shaft. Cole heard it hit the walls going down. Heard it hit something soft that screamed. Heard the crash as it hit bottom. The screaming stopped. The voices below grew frantic, then faded as the survivors retreated. Cole collapsed beside Grace and Emma, all three of them gasping in the thin mountain air. They were on the north face of Cathedral Ridge, 2,000 feet above the valley floor. Below them, Cole could see the orange glow of his burning ranch. Beyond that, the scattered lights of Cedar Ridge, where comfortable people slept in warm beds and told themselves that justice had been served. Snow fell harder, now beginning to cover their tracks. That was good. They needed every advantage they could get, because Harlan would be regrouping, getting more men preparing for another try. And Cole was down to his last 2 bullets and his last reserves of strength. But they were alive. All 3 of them. And sometimes alive was all you got to claim as victory. Now what? Emma asked, her teeth chattering from cold and shock. Cole looked north towards Silverton in the Territorial Marshal. 20 miles through mountain country in a blizzard with a woman who could barely walk and a child who should not have to see the things she had seen. 20 miles with armed men hunting them and winter closing in like a fist. Now we walk, he said. We walk until we reach someone who will listen, someone who will help, and we don't stop walking until this is finished. He helped Grace to her feet, steadied her when she swayed. Emma took her mother's other arm. Together, the 3 of them started north through the falling snow, leaving behind the only home Cole had known for 5 years, heading toward an uncertain future with nothing but determination and 2 bullets between them and death. Behind them, down in Cedar Ridge, Mayor William Harlan stood in the town square and watched the flames die on the distant ridge. His men were returning in defeat, some wounded, some dead, all of them shaken. The assault had failed. Mercer and the woman were gone, disappeared into the storm with evidence that could hang him. For the first time, doubt crept into Harlan's mind. Maybe he had underestimated the ex-deputy. Maybe this was not over as quickly as he had hoped. But he had come too far to turn back now. Sutton was dead. The debts were erased. All that stood between him and prosperity were three people freezing in the mountains. Three people would not last long in a blizzard. Nature would finish what he had started, and if by some miracle they survived well, he would make sure the welcome waiting for them in Silverton was not the one they expected. Harlan smiled and turned back toward his warm house and his soft bed. One way or another, this would be over soon. The guilty always got what was coming to them. He just did not realize yet that in this story he was the guilty one. The snow turned the world into a white hell. Within an hour, Cole could not see more than 10 feet ahead, and the wind cut through his coat like it was made of paper. Grace lasted maybe 2 miles before her legs gave out completely. Cole caught her before she hit the ground, her body light as kindling and twice as fragile. "I can't," she whispered through blue lips. "Go on without me. Take Emma and go." "Not happening." Cole lifted her onto his back, her arms wrapped around his neck. She weighed almost nothing, but even nothing became heavy when you were climbing through knee-deep snow with a bad leg and arms that had pulled two people up a mine shaft. Emma walked beside him, her small hand gripping his coat. She did not complain, did not cry, just put one foot in front of the other, like a tiny soldier marching toward an uncertain war. Cole had never seen a child with that kind of steel in her spine. They walked for hours, Cole counting steps to keep himself focused. 100, 200, 500. When he reached 1,000, he started over. The numbers kept his mind from wandering to dark places, to thoughts of his own daughter in a snowstorm just like this, to the cabin fire that had taken her and her mother while he was away, chasing rustlers who did not matter. "Mr. Cole," Emma's voice was nearly lost in the wind. "I can't feel my feet anymore." He stopped, looked down at her boots. They were thin, meant for summer, soaked through and probably frozen solid. Frostbite would set in soon if it had not already. They needed shelter, or they needed a miracle, and Cole was fresh out of both. "Just a little further," he lied. "There's an old trapper's cabin up ahead. We'll warm up there." There was a cabin, that much was true, but Cole was not sure if he could find it in this storm, was not sure if it would still be standing after 5 years of abandonment. Still, it was something to aim for, and hope was better than nothing when you were dying by inches in the high country. Grace's breathing had gone shallow against his neck. He could feel her heartbeat fast and weak like a bird dying in winter. The poison Harlan had fed her was still working its way through her system, and the cold and exertion were pushing her body past its limits. "Stay with me," Cole murmured. "You don't get to quit now. Not after everything we've been through." No response. Just that faint heartbeat and the rasp of labored breathing. The wind shifted and Cole caught a smell. Wood smoke, fresh wood smoke, which meant fire, which meant people. He adjusted course, following the scent like a bloodhound. Emma stumbled, but kept pace, her hand never leaving his coat. The cabin materialized out of the whiteness like something from a fever dream. It was smaller than Cole remembered, leaning slightly to one side, but there was light in the window and smoke rising from the chimney. Someone was home. Cole pounded on the door with his free hand. "Hello, the cabin need help out here." "Oh." For a long moment, nothing. Then the door cracked open and a rifle barrel poked through, followed by the weathered face of a man who looked like he had been carved from the same granite as these mountains. "Who are you?" The voice was rough as gravel. "Cole Mercer, used to be deputy in these parts. Got a sick woman and a child, both near frozen. Need to come in." The man studied them for what felt like an eternity. Then the rifle lowered and the door opened wider. "Dutch Ellis, been trapping these mountains for 30 years. Get in here before you all die on my doorstep." The warmth inside hit Cole like a physical blow. His frozen skin screamed as blood started flowing again. The man Dutch helped him lower Grace onto a cot near the fire, then turned his attention to Emma, pulling off her wet boots and wrapping her feet in warm blankets. "What fool thing brought you out in weather like this?" Dutch asked. "Long story," Cole said, his teeth chattering so hard he could barely speak. "Men hunting us. Men who want us dead." Dutch's eyes narrowed. "What kind of men?" "The kind that work for a mayor who doesn't like loose ends." "Harland," Dutch spat the name like a curse. "That son of a bitch. Heard he was pushing hard for a hanging in Cedar Ridge. That this woman here," Cole nodded. "Grace Miller. She's innocent. I got proof. But we need to reach the territorial marshal in Silverton before Harlan can cover his tracks." Dutch moved to Grace, checking her pulse, lifting her eyelids. His hands were surprisingly gentle for such a hard-looking man. She's burning up. And these symptoms, I've seen this before. Poison, Cole said. Harlan was feeding her tea laced with something. Don't know what. I do. Dutch stood and moved to a cabinet, pulling down dried herbs in a glass bottle. It's hellebore. Grows wild in the lower valleys. Small doses cause confusion, memory loss, tremors. Large doses kill. He was keeping her right on the edge, sick enough to be unreliable, alive enough to take the blame. Can you help her? Maybe, if we can flush the poison out and keep her warm. Dutch started crushing herbs in a mortar, mixing them with water from a kettle. But she's weak. Touch and go whether she makes it through the night. Emma had been silent, huddled by the fire. Now she spoke up, her voice small but clear. Please save my mama. Please. Dutch's hard face softened just a fraction. I'll do my best, little one. That's all any man can promise. He worked through the night, spooning medicine into Grace's mouth, forcing her to swallow even when she was too far gone to be conscious. Cole tried to help, but Dutch waved him off. You rest, you're half dead yourself, and no good to anyone in that condition. So Cole sat with Emma, both of them wrapped in blankets, watching Dutch work. The old trapper had the careful efficiency of a man who had spent decades dealing with emergencies in isolation. Every movement was purposeful, every action calculated. Mr. Cole, Emma whispered, what happens if Mama dies? The question hit him harder than it should have. She's not going to die. But what if she does? What happens to me? Cole looked down at this fierce little girl who had grabbed his coat 3 days ago and changed everything. 3 days. It felt like a lifetime. Then you stay with me, he heard himself say. I'll take care of you. Promise? He should have hesitated. Should have remembered that promises were dangerous things, that the universe had a way of breaking them, just when they mattered most. But when he looked into Emma's eyes, he saw his own daughter looking back, and the words came out before he could stop them. I promise, though. Dawn came gray and cold. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried under 3 feet of fresh snow. Grace still lived, her breathing steadier, now the tremors in her hands finally starting to ease. Dutch pronounced her out of immediate danger, though recovery would take weeks. She needs rest, food, and time. The poison's working its way out, but she's weak as a newborn kitten. Won't be walking anywhere for days. Cole looked out the window at the pristine white landscape. Somewhere out there, Harlan was planning his next move. And here they were, trapped in a cabin with a woman who could not walk and evidence that needed to reach the marshal. I have to go, Cole said. Get to Silverton and bring back help. That's 15 miles through snow that'll swallow a horse, Dutch pointed out. You won't make it alone. Don't have a choice. Actually, you do. Dutch pulled on his coat and reached for snowshoes hanging on the wall. I'll go. I know these mountains better than any man alive, and you're needed here to watch over the woman and child. He paused, then pulled out a worn badge from his pocket. The silver caught the morning light, and Cole's breath stopped. I'm a sworn deputy, too. Territorial appointment, 30 years running. Still active, unlike some folks. Cole stared at the badge, recognition dawning. Dutch Ellis, you were part of Judge Harrison's circuit. You testified in the Brennan case back in '82. I did. Dutch's face was unreadable. And I know who you are, Cole. Know what you lost 5 years ago. Fire that took your family. Cole's throat went tight. I was there that day. Dutch continued, his voice quiet but firm. Part of the posse chasing those rustlers. My boy Thomas, he was helping your wife and daughter when the blaze started. Tried to get them out. The world seemed to tilt beneath Cole's feet. Your son didn't make it, went back in for Sarah, your little girl. Found them together in what was left of your daughter's room. He'd covered her with his body, trying to protect her from the smoke. Dutch's voice never wavered, but his eyes told a different story. We both walked away from our badges that day, Cole. Both thought we were done, but here we are 30 years later, still trying to do the right thing. Cole could not speak, could not breathe. All this time, he had thought he was alone in his grief, that no one understood the weight of that loss. But Dutch had been carrying the same burden, walking the same lonely road. Why didn't you ever say anything? What was there to say? Your loss was your loss. Mine was mine. Talking doesn't bring them back. Dutch strapped on his snowshoes and shouldered his pack. But that little girl in there, she's alive, and she needs someone she can count on. You make good on that promise you made her, you hear me? Cole nodded, unable to form words. Dutch opened the door and cold air rushed in. Bar this after I leave. Don't open for anyone but me or the marshal. I'll be back with help by tomorrow night. Then he was gone, moving across the snow with the easy stride of a man born to these mountains. Cole watched until Dutch disappeared into the tree line, then barred the door and settled in to wait. The day that followed developed a rhythm. Cole tended Grace, watching as color slowly returned to her face as the tremors eased, as memories started filling in the blank spaces. Emma helped where she could, fetching water, stirring the pot of thin soup Dutch had left simmering. They did not talk much. There was not much to say that the silence did not cover better. On the afternoon of the second day, Grace opened her eyes and spoke clearly for the first time since the hanging. "Where are we safe?" Cole said. "Dutch Ellis's cabin, about 10 miles north of where we started." She tried to sit up, winced, and settled back. "Dutch Ellis, I know that name. He testified at a trial once years back. Saved a man from hanging with his testimony. Seems like that's his specialty. He's gone to fetch the marshal. Should be back soon with help." "And Emma?" "Right here, Mama." The girl appeared at the bedside, taking her mother's hand. "You've been sick, but you're getting better." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I'd never see you again. When they put that rope around my neck." "Don't," Cole said gently. "Don't go back there. You're alive. Emma's safe, and soon this will all be over." "Will it?" Grace's gaze was sharp, despite her weakness. "Harlan has money influence, half the town working for him, and what's to stop him from twisting this around, making us look like the criminals? Evidence, truth, the law." Cole sat on the edge of the cot. "I know the law has failed you before failed you bad, but Dutch is bringing back a real lawman, one who can't be bought or intimidated. Once Marshal Clayton sees what we've got, Harlan's finished. You have a lot of faith in the law for a man who stopped wearing a badge." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "I lost my faith when my family died. Spent 5 years thinking the world was nothing but cruelty dressed up in pretty words. But then your daughter grabbed my coat and asked me to help. And I remembered something important." "What's that?" "That the law isn't some distant thing that exists outside us. It's what we make it. Every time we stand up for what's right, every time we refuse to look away from injustice, every time we put ourselves between the strong and the weak, that's the law. Not words on paper, but actions in the world." Grace reached out and touched his hand, her fingers still trembling slightly. "Thank you for everything. You didn't have to do any of this." "Yeah," Cole said quietly. "I did." On the evening of the second day, Emma spotted riders coming up the valley. 6 men on horseback moving carefully through the deep snow. Cole grabbed his rifle and positioned himself by the window, but Emma's sharp eyes had already identified them. "It's Dutch, and there's other men with badges." Cole opened the door as the riders approached. Dutch was in the lead, looking tired but satisfied. Behind him rode a tall man with iron-gray hair and a marshal star on his chest. This would be Marshal James Clayton. The other 4 wore deputy badges and carried themselves like men who knew their business. "Got your evidence to the right people," Dutch called out. "Marshal's here to take statements and make arrests." Marshal Clayton dismounted with the stiff movements of a man who had spent too many hours in the saddle. He studied Cole with eyes that missed nothing. "You're Mercer, the deputy who stopped the hanging." "I am." "Dutch showed me what you collected. That belt alone is damning and the promissory note seals it. But I'll need statements from you and Mrs. Miller, written and signed, detailing everything that happened. You'll have them, but I need to know, can you actually make this stick? Harlan's got the whole town convinced Grace killed Sutton. How do you prove otherwise?" Clayton's smile was thin and cold. "By doing what should have been done from the start. A real investigation. I've already sent 2 of my men to Cedar Ridge to secure the crime scene and interview witnesses. And I sent a telegram to the territorial governor's office. By tomorrow, there'll be a special prosecutor assigned to this case. Harlan can buy a town, but he can't buy the territorial government." Over the next several hours, Cole and Grace gave their statements, with Emma adding what she had witnessed. Clayton's deputy wrote it all down in careful script, asking questions that showed he had been doing this work long enough to know what mattered. When they were finished, Clayton read through the statements twice, then nodded with satisfaction. "This is solid. means motive opportunity, physical evidence, and witness testimony. Harlan's going to hang for this, and anyone who helped him is looking at accessory charges. When do we move? Cole asked. Tomorrow at first light. I want you there, Mercer. You're the primary witness, and having another deputy present adds weight to the proceedings. Mrs. Miller will need to stay here. She's not strong enough. I'm going, Grace said firmly from the cot. That man tried to murder me twice. I want to look him in the eye when you put him in chains. Ma'am, with all respect, I said I'm going. Grace's voice was wrapped in steel. I've been run down, poisoned, beaten, and nearly hanged. I've earned the right to see justice done. Clayton looked at Cole, who shrugged. She's got a point. Fine, but you ride in a wagon with blankets. If you look like you're fading, you stop and rest. I won't have you dying on me before we get Harlan locked up. That night, Cole barely slept. He kept thinking about tomorrow, about facing down the mayor in his own town, about the moment when power would shift and truth would finally matter more than influence. He had waited 5 years for a reckoning, though he had not known it. Now it was coming, and he felt like a man standing at the edge of a cliff when, at his back, nothing but air and falling ahead. Emma found him sitting by the fire sometime past midnight. She settled next to him without speaking, and they watched the flames dance together. I'm scared, she finally said. Me too. But you're brave. You saved us. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared, little one. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. Will they hurt Mama again? In court, I mean. Will they make her feel bad? They'll try. That's what defense lawyers do, try to make the victim look guilty. But your mama's strong. She's got the truth on her side. That counts for something. Does it? Emma's voice was small. Because it seems like strong men with money get away with everything, and people like us just get hurt. Cole had no easy answer for that. It was true more often than not. But sometimes, just sometimes, the scales balanced and justice found its way home. Not this time, he said. This time we make it count. Dawn came clear and cold. The party set out at first light. 6 riders, 1 wagon carrying Grace and Emma, and a determination that felt like something solid you could touch. They moved slowly through the snow, taking the long way around to avoid the mountain passes where Harlan might have men watching. It took most of the day to reach Cedar Ridge. As they crested the final ridge and looked down into the valley, Cole saw his ranch, or what was left of it. Just blackened timbers and ash now. The barn completely gone, the house reduced to a charred skeleton. 5 years of his life erased in one night of violence. But he felt lighter somehow, looking at those ruins. Like burning down the past had freed something in him that he had kept locked away too long. They rode into town at sunset when the light turned everything gold and the shadows stretched long. People came out of their houses to stare, their faces showing shock and confusion. The mayor had told them Grace was dead, burned up in Mercer's ranch along with that traitorous deputy. But here she was alive and sitting up in a wagon with a territorial marshal riding ahead and 4 deputies flanking them like guards of honor. Marshal Clayton headed straight for the town hall where the council was meeting. He did not knock, just pushed open the doors and walked in with his deputies behind him. Cole followed Grace, leaning on his arm, Emma holding her mother's hand. Mayor William Harlan sat at the head of the table mid-sentence about some budget matter. He stopped talking when he saw them, his face going through a series of expressions. Surprise, fear, anger, and finally settling into a mask of false welcome. Marshal Clayton, what a pleasant surprise. If we'd known you were coming, we would have... William Harlan, I'm placing you under arrest for the murder of Henry Sutton and the attempted murder of Grace Miller. Clayton's voice carried to every corner of the room. You have the right to remain silent, though anything you say will be used against you in a court of law. The room erupted. Council members shouting questions, chairs scraping, someone running for the door. But Clayton's deputies had already positioned themselves at the exits, and no one was leaving until this was finished. Harlan stood slowly, his face red with indignation. This is preposterous. On what evidence do you make these charges? On the evidence of your belt found at the crime scene with Sutton's blood on it. On the evidence of a promissory note showing Sutton owed you $5,000. On the evidence of witness testimony that you fed Mrs. Miller poison tea for a week before the murder. And on the evidence of your own actions, trying to rush through an illegal execution, then attempting to murder 3 people to cover your crimes. Clayton pulled out handcuffs. You can come quiet or you can come loud. Your choice. For a moment, Cole thought Harlan might fight. The mayor's hand moved toward his coat where he probably kept a pistol. But then he saw Cole's face, saw the absolute certainty there, and his hand dropped. This won't stand, Harlan said quietly. I have lawyers. I have friends in high places. Then they can visit you in prison while you wait for trial. Clayton snapped the cuffs on Harlan's wrists. Take him to the jail. Double guard, no visitors without my approval. As the deputies led Harlan out, he locked eyes with Grace. For just a moment, the mask slipped and she saw the real man underneath. Cold, calculating, utterly without remorse. He had tried to murder her not out of passion or rage, but out of simple convenience. She was a problem to be solved, nothing more. Grace lifted her chin and met his gaze without flinching. I hope you rot. I hope you live long enough to understand what you tried to take from me. Harlan smiled, then a thin, cruel thing that had no warmth in it. You're nobody. You'll always be nobody. And in a week, everyone will have forgotten your name. Maybe, Cole said, stepping forward. But they'll remember yours. They'll remember the mayor who murdered for money and tried to hang an innocent woman to cover it up. That's the legacy you're leaving, Harlan. Not power or respect. Just shame. The smile faded. Harlan looked suddenly old, diminished, a small man who had built himself up on the backs of others and was finally being cut down to his true size. The deputies hauled him out, and the last Cole saw of him was his expensive coat disappearing through the door. The town council sat in stunned silence. Finally, one of them, Jack Sutton, cleared his throat. Marshal, what happens now? Now we do what should have been done 4 days ago. We investigate. We gather evidence. We interview witnesses. Then we hold a proper trial where the defendant gets representation and the prosecution has to prove its case beyond reasonable doubt. That's how the law works when it's not being twisted by corrupt men. He turned to face the whole council. Let me be clear. Anyone who helped Harlan rush that execution, anyone who rode out to burn Mercer's ranch, anyone who tried to cover up the truth, you're going to answer for it. Maybe not with prison time, but you'll answer. This community needs to take a long, hard look at itself and decide what kind of place it wants to be. The room was quiet enough to hear a pin drop. Marshal Clayton looked at Cole. As for you, Mercer, I'm officially reactivating your commission. The territory needs good deputies, and you've proven you remember what the badge means. You interested? Cole looked down at Emma, who was watching him with those two old eyes. Then at Grace, who had straightened despite her weakness, her bruised face fierce with pride. Then out the window at the ruined remains of his old life, at the gallows still standing in the town square like a monument to shame. I'm interested, but I've got conditions. Name them. First, the gallows comes down tomorrow. Public ceremony, everyone watching. Second, Grace and Emma get protection until the trial's over and Harlan's sentenced. And third, he paused, making sure everyone was listening. This town establishes a proper court system, real trials, real evidence, real justice. No more mob rule disguised as law. Clayton smiled. Done, done, and done. Consider yourself sworn in, Deputy Mercer. He pulled out a new badge, silver and shining, not tarnished like the old one Cole had been carrying. Cole took it, felt its weight in his palm, then pinned it to his chest where it caught the lamplight and threw back small stars. Emma grabbed his hand. Does this mean we're staying, all of us? Cole looked at Grace, asking a question without words. She smiled a real smile this time, the first he had seen from her, and nodded. Yeah, little one, Cole said. We're staying. The next morning broke cold and clear. Cole stood in the town square before the sun had fully risen, watching as a work crew assembled around the gallows. Marshal Clayton had kept his word. The scaffold was coming down today, and everyone in Cedar Ridge would watch it happen. People began gathering around 1 o'clock, drawn by curiosity and something else Cole could not quite name. Shame maybe, or the need to witness an ending so they could begin to move forward. They came in clusters. Families, shopkeepers, ranchers who had ridden in from outlying properties. Some looked defiant, others could not meet Cole's eyes. All of them had been there 4 days ago, ready to watch Grace hang. Now they were here to watch the instrument of that injustice come down. Grace stood beside Cole. Emma tucked against her side. She was still weak, still recovering, but she had insisted on being here for this. Dutch had come too, standing at Cole's other shoulder like a granite monument. Several of Clayton's deputies ringed the square to keep order. The town council had assembled on the steps of the town hall. Jack Sutton stepped forward, clearing his throat nervously. Folks were gathered here today to acknowledge a wrong done and to begin making it right. 4 days ago, we almost hanged an innocent woman. We let fear and anger blind us to justice, and we nearly committed murder under the guise of law. His voice cracked slightly. Some of us participated more than others, but all of us bear responsibility for what almost happened. So today we're tearing down this gallows as a symbol that Cedar Ridge will no longer tolerate mob justice. From now on, we follow the law, real law, fair law, law that protects the innocent as much as it punishes the guilty. There was scattered applause, thin and uncertain. Cole understood. These people did not know yet how to feel about what had happened. They had been told Grace was a murderess, had believed it because believing was easier than questioning. Now they had to live with the fact that they had nearly killed her. And that kind of knowledge sat heavy in the soul. The work crew started with the steps prying up boards that groaned as they came loose. Then the platform itself, solid pine that had been built to last. The noose came down last, that hateful loop of rope that had touched Grace's neck. The foreman held it up, looked at Marshal Clayton, who nodded. The man threw it into a barrel where a fire had been started, and together they watched it burn. Emma pressed closer to her mother. "Is it over now? Are we safe?" "Not yet, little one," Grace said softly. "There's still the trial, still people who might not believe us. But we're safer than we were." Cole felt Emma's small hand slip into his. "You'll keep us safe, though, right, Mr. Cole?" He looked down at this child who had changed everything, who had grabbed his coat and asked him to remember he was still alive. "As long as I'm breathing, nothing's going to hurt either of you. That's a promise I know how to keep." The gallows came down piece by piece through the morning, and by noon it was nothing but a pile of lumber, waiting to be hauled away. The crowd began to disperse, returning to their daily routines, though Cole noticed many of them stopped to speak to Grace first. Quiet apologies, offerings to help, shame-faced acknowledgments that they had been wrong. Grace accepted each one with a grace Cole found remarkable, given what these people had tried to do to her. A woman approached Mrs. Patterson, who ran the general store. She held out a basket covered with a cloth. "Mrs. Miller, I was there when they put the noose around your neck. I didn't say anything, didn't try to stop it. I'm sorry for that, more sorry than I can say." She pulled back the cloth, revealing bread, cheese, dried fruit, and preserves. "This isn't much, but it's honest, and I wanted you to know that not everyone in this town is rotten." Grace took the basket, her eyes glistening. "Thank you. This means more than you know." Others came after. The school teacher with books for Emma, the seamstress with fabric for new dresses, the blacksmith with nails and tools for rebuilding. Small offerings, each one a brick in the bridge they were trying to build back to decency. Cole watched it all and thought maybe, just maybe, there was hope for this town after all. The trial began 2 weeks later, held in the town hall with Judge Harrison presiding. The territorial prosecutor had arrived 3 days prior, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Chen, who had made her reputation taking down corrupt officials. Cole had liked her immediately when she had looked at the evidence and said, "Harlan's going to hang for this, and I'm going to enjoy watching it happen." The trial drew people from 3 counties. Every seat in the hall was filled with more folks standing in the back and crowding around the windows outside. This was the kind of spectacle that people would talk about for years. A mayor on trial for murder, accusations of poisoning and conspiracy, a widow nearly hanged for a crime she did not commit. Harlan sat at the defense table in his expensive suit, looking calm and confident. He had hired the best lawyer in the territory, a man named Franklin Blackwood, who had gotten more guilty men off than most people had hot dinners. But as the trial progressed, even Blackwood's skill could not overcome the weight of evidence. Prosecutor Chen laid it out methodically, building her case like a master stonemason building a wall. First came the belt found at the crime scene, identified as Harlan's by 3 different witnesses. Blackwood tried to argue it had been planted, but Chen had photographs of the scene taken before Cole had even arrived, and the belt was visible in those photos. Then came the promissory note showing Sutton's debt to Harlan and the deadline that had passed the day of the murder. Blackwood argued that debt was not motive for murder, but Chen countered by presenting evidence of Harlan's own financial troubles. Mounting debts, failed investments, a lifestyle he could no longer afford. Killing Sutton and taking his ranch wasn't just convenient for the defendant, Chen told the jury. It was necessary for Harlan's survival. Grace took the stand on the third day. She was still thin, still bearing the faded bruises from her beating, but she held her head high as Chen questioned her. Mrs. Miller, can you tell the court about your relationship with the defendant? He presented himself as a friend, said he wanted to help a poor widow and her child. He brought me tea, offered advice, seemed genuinely kind. When did that change? When I started getting sick. The tremors started first, then the memory problems. Some days I couldn't remember Emma's name, couldn't remember where I was. Mayor Harlan said it was stress that I needed to rest, but the sickness only got worse. Chen held up a bottle. This is hellebore, Your Honor, a poison that causes exactly the symptoms Mrs. Miller describes. Dr. Ellis has testified that traces of this substance were found in Mrs. Miller's blood. The defense would have you believe she somehow poisoned herself. But I ask you, why would a woman poison herself in a way that makes her unable to defend herself against false accusations? Blackwood stood. Objection. The prosecutor is testifying instead of questioning. Sustained. Rephrase Ms. Chen. Mrs. Miller, did you ever have access to hellebore? I don't even know what that is. Did you poison yourself? No, why would I? Why indeed? Chen turned to face the jury, but the defendant had every reason to poison her. He needed a confused, unreliable witness who could be blamed for Sutton's murder. Someone who couldn't defend herself or remember clearly what happened. Someone expendable. Emma testified next, and watching her walk to the stand nearly broke Cole's heart. She was so small in that big chair, her feet dangling above the floor, but her voice was clear and steady as she told what she had seen and heard. Blackwood tried to discredit her during cross-examination, suggesting she was confused or had been coached. But Emma did not waver. I know what I saw, she said firmly. I know what I heard, and I know my mama didn't kill anybody. Blackwood smiled condescendingly. You're very young, Miss Emma. Sometimes children imagine things or remember things wrong. Emma's voice cut through his patronizing tone like a knife. I'm not imagining anything. You're trying to make everyone think I'm stupid because I'm little, but I'm not stupid and I'm not lying. Mayor Harlan brought Mama poison tea, and then Mr. Sutton ended up dead. And then the mayor tried to hang Mama before anyone could ask questions. That's what happened, and everyone here knows it's true, even if they don't want to say it. The courtroom went silent. Even Blackwood had no response to that kind of devastating clarity. Judge Harrison leaned forward. The witness may step down. Cole testified on the fifth day, walking the court through everything he had found, every piece of evidence, every witness statement. Blackwood tried to shake him during cross-examination, suggesting he had manufactured evidence to protect Grace. But Cole had been testifying in court since before Blackwood was born. He knew how to stay calm, how to stick to facts, how to let the truth speak for itself. On the sixth day, the prosecution called its final witness. Martha Green, Sutton's housekeeper, the woman who had claimed she saw Grace kill him. She walked to the stand, slowly, hands shaking a woman in her late 50s with a face lined with worry. Chen stood. Mrs. Green, you testified at the preliminary hearing that you saw Mrs. Miller attack Henry Sutton with a fireplace poker. Is that correct? A long pause. That's what I said, yes. Is it what you saw? A longer pause. Martha's face crumbled. No, I didn't see that. The courtroom exploded. Judge Harrison banged his gavel for order. Mrs. Green, can you tell us what you did see? Martha wiped her eyes. I saw Mr. Sutton attacking Mrs. Miller. He was drunk and angry. She was trying to get away. He grabbed her, tore her dress. Then Mayor Harlan came in. I thought he was there to help. But instead, he picked up the fireplace poker and hit Mr. Sutton from behind. Hit him so hard. Why didn't you tell the truth before? Because Mayor Harlan said if I talked, he'd make sure I lost my position. That no one would believe me anyway. He said Grace Miller was nobody, and nobody cared what happened to nobodies. Martha looked at Grace with tears streaming. I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller. I should have told the truth from the start. Grace nodded, unable to speak. The prosecution rested. Blackwood put on a defense that was all smoke and mirrors. Character witnesses swearing Harlan was a good man experts questioning forensic evidence, alternate theories blaming everyone from drifters to Sutton's creditors. But none of it could overcome the fundamental truth Chen had established. Harlan had motive, means, and opportunity. His own actions after the murder proved his guilt. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Cole spent that time in the hallway with Grace and Emma, none of them speaking much, just existing in that terrible limbo between guilt and innocence. When the bailiff finally called them back, Cole's heart was hammering so hard he thought the whole courtroom could hear it. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable. The foreman stood holding a paper that seemed to weigh more than the mountains outside. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Harrison asked. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of murder in the first degree, how do you find?" "We find the defendant, William Harlan, guilty." The courtroom erupted, some people cheering, others gasping. Harlan's face went white as chalk. His lawyer was already shouting about appeals, about procedural errors, about anything that might delay the inevitable. But Judge Harrison just banged his gavel and called for order. "On the charge of attempted murder of Grace Miller, how do you find guilty, Your Honor? On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find guilty? On the charge of witness tampering, how do you find guilty?" 4 guilty verdicts. Cole felt Emma's hand grip his, felt Grace lean against his shoulder, and allowed himself to breathe for what felt like the first time in weeks. It was over. The truth had won. Judge Harrison sentenced Harlan to hang within the month. The former mayor did not even flinch when the sentence was read, just sat there staring at nothing, a man who had finally run out of moves. As the deputies led him away, he looked at Grace one last time. "It was just business," he said, his voice empty. "Nothing personal." Grace stood, drawing herself up to her full height despite the weakness still evident in her frame. "That's what makes you a monster. You tried to murder me and orphan my child, and to you it was just business. I hope you meet God with that on your conscience, Mr. Harlan. I hope he asks you if it was worth it." Harlan had no answer for that. The deputies took him away, and Cole never saw him again. 3 weeks later, the town gathered to watch justice carried out on a new scaffold built specifically for the occasion. Cole did not attend. He had seen enough death in his life, and vengeance held no appeal. Instead, he spent that morning helping Emma with her schoolwork, teaching her long division, and listening to her read from a book about explorers. The weeks after the trial were strange. Cedar Ridge was trying to find its footing again, trying to figure out how to be a town instead of a mob. There were still people who believed Harlan had been railroaded, who thought Grace had somehow seduced or manipulated Cole into protecting her. But those voices got quieter as time passed, drowned out by the weight of evidence and the slow return of decency. Cole took a room above the general store, close enough to where Grace and Emma were staying to keep an eye on them, but far enough to be proper. He wore his badge every day, walking the streets, settling disputes, reminding people that the law was there to protect everyone, not just the powerful. It was slow work rebuilding trust, but it was good work, the kind that made a man feel useful again. Grace got stronger week by week. The poison worked its way out of her system. The tremors stopped and color returned to her face. She took up her seamstress work again, and soon half the women in town were bringing her their mending and their orders for new dresses. Emma went back to school, where she quickly proved herself the brightest student in her class. Cole would sometimes see her in the schoolyard playing with other children, laughing, and it filled something in him he had not known was empty. 3 months after the trial, on a Sunday morning, bright with spring sunshine, Cole found himself walking toward the little church on the hill where most of the town gathered for services. He had not been to church in 5 years, could not stomach the hymns and the prayers, when his own prayers had gone unanswered the night his family died. But Emma had asked him to come hear her read a poem she had written, and he had learned that saying no to that child was impossible. The church was full when he arrived, every pew packed with families in their Sunday clothes. Cole slipped into the back, but Emma spotted him immediately, and her face lit up. She waved from the front row where she sat with her mother, and several people turned to see who she was waving at. Cole nodded back, feeling awkward and out of place in this gathering of faith and community. The service proceeded with hymns and prayers and a sermon about forgiveness that Cole only half listened to. Then came the part where children could share poems or drawings or songs they had learned. 3 children went before Emma, each one reciting nervously before scurrying back to their seats. Then Emma stood and walked to the front, holding a paper with her poem written on it. But when she got there, she did not look at the paper. She looked straight at Cole. This is called The Home We Found, she announced. I wrote it for my mama and the words hit Cole like a thunderbolt. He glanced at Grace, who was smiling through tears. Emma began to read, her young voice clear and strong. We were lost in the cold, in the dark, in the snow, with nowhere to hide and no place to go. Mama was sick, and I was afraid that the bad men would find us before we were saved. Then a man with a badge and a heart made of stone said he'd keep us safe, said we'd have a home. He fought through the fire, he climbed through the mine, he promised he'd keep us, and he kept his promise fine. Now Mama can smile, and I go to school and the bad man is gone and we're safe from his rule. We found us a home that won't burn down or break, with a papa and a mama, and love that won't shake. She looked up from the paper. The man who saved us taught me something important. He taught me that family isn't just blood. It's the people who stand with you when everything's dark. It's the people who keep their promises even when it's hard. That's what makes a papa. Not making a baby, but choosing to stay. The church was silent. Cole could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything but stare at this fierce little girl who had grabbed his coat 4 months ago and asked him to save her mother. Emma walked down the aisle, came straight to where Cole sat and took his hand. Come on, Pa. Mama's waiting. Cole let her lead him to the front row where Grace stood and took his other hand. She leaned close and whispered, She's right, you know. You've been her father in every way that matters. I'd like you to be her father in name too, if you're willing. I'm willing, Queen managed. God knows I'm willing. After the service ended, people crowded around them. Congratulations, handshakes, invitations to dinners. Dutch appeared from somewhere in the back and clapped Cole on the shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. About damn time, Dutch said. You three have been circling each other like nervous dogs for months. Good to see you finally figured it out. They walked back to the little house Grace had been renting, the three of them moving together like they had been a family all along. It was small, 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, but it was clean and bright, and it smelled like Grace's cooking. Emma ran ahead to start a fire while Cole helped Grace with her shawl. I need to ask you something, Grace said quietly. Something important. Cole's heart hammered. Do you want this truly? Not because Emma asked, not because you feel obligated, but because you want a family again. Because if you don't, if this is too much or too fast or too painful after what you lost, I need you to tell me now. Cole took both her hands in his. They were still scarred from the ropes that had bound her, still bore the faint tremor that might never fully go away. But they were strong hands, capable, hands that had held her daughter and sown beautiful things and survived hell. I lost my first family, he said, and I spent 5 years thinking that meant I was done, that the best parts of my life were buried in that cemetery plot. But then your daughter grabbed my coat and looked at me like I mattered, and something in me remembered how to care. You and Emma, you saved me as much as I saved you. So yes, I want this. I want to wake up in a house that has voices in it. I want to help Emma with her schoolwork and argue with you about dinner. I want to build something that lasts. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I'm damaged goods, Cole, used up and scarred and half poisoned. I don't know if I can give you more children. Don't know if I can be the wife you deserve. You're the bravest person I've ever met, Cole cut her off. You survived abuse and poison and nearly being hanged. And you came through it with your spirit intact. That's not damaged. That's steel wrapped in silk. Grace leaned forward and kissed him soft and tentative, like she was afraid he might disappear. Cole kissed her back, and it felt like coming home after a long journey through country that had tried to kill him. Inside the house, Emma was watching through the window. She grinned and pumped her fist in victory. The wedding happened a month later on a hillside green with spring grass and wildflowers. It was not fancy, just Judge Harrison officiating and maybe 20 people gathered to witness. But it was real and true and filled with a joy that Cole had not felt in years. Emma stood between them, holding both their hands as Harrison read the brief ceremony. When it came time for vows, Cole turned to Grace and spoke from his heart. I promise to stand with you through whatever comes. To be a father to Emma and a partner to you. To build a home that stays instead of one that burns. I promise to remember that the badge I wear serves justice, but the love I feel for you and Emma serves something even greater. I promise I won't let fear or ghosts keep me from being present, from being here, from being yours. Grace's voice was thick with emotion when she spoke her own vows. I promise to trust you when trust doesn't come easy, to let you help carry the weight when it gets too heavy, to be strong when you need me to be, and to let myself be vulnerable when you have earned it. I promise to make a home with you that's built on truth and courage instead of fear and secrets. And I promise that the second chance you've given Emma and me will not be wasted. Judge Harrison tied a simple strip of leather around their joined hands, an old tradition from the mountain people. By the authority invested in me by the territory, and by common decency, I declare you husband and wife. Cole, you may kiss your bride and hug your daughter because God knows you all deserve some happiness. Cole did both, and the small gathering cheered. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in colors that had no names, Cole stood with his arms around Grace and Emma and looked out at the valley below. Somewhere down there was Cedar Ridge slowly learning to be better. Somewhere down there were the ashes of his old ranch and the cemetery where his first family rested. Somewhere down there was everything he had lost and everything he had found. Are you happy, Pa? Emma asked, looking up at him with those eyes that saw too much and understood everything. Cole thought about the question. Happy seemed like too small a word for what he felt. Grateful, yes. Content, yes. Cautiously hopeful, yes. But underneath all of that was something else, something he had thought he would never feel again. Peace, the sense that he had finally stopped running from his past and had started building a future. Yeah, little one, he said. I'm happy. Good, because Mama and me, we picked you, and we don't pick wrong. Grace laughed and pulled them both closer. No, we certainly don't. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Cole stood in his new house, built on the same land as the old one, but different in every way that mattered. It was bigger with 3 bedrooms and a proper kitchen. Grace's sewing room had good light from southern windows. Emma's room had shelves for her growing collection of books. And in the main room above the fireplace hung 2 photographs side by side. The first showed Cole's original family. His first wife, Margaret, and daughter Sarah smiling at a church picnic years ago. They looked happy and alive, frozen in a moment before tragedy struck. Cole had kept that photograph hidden for 5 years, unable to look at it without breaking. Now he could see it and smile, remembering the good times without being destroyed by the grief. The second photograph was new, taken at the wedding. Grace and Emma and Cole standing together on that hillside with wild flowers at their feet and hope in their eyes. It was not a replacement. That was not how love worked. It was an addition. Proof that life could offer second chances, that broken things could be made whole, that a man could lose everything and somehow find his way to something even better. Emma came running through the door, her face flushed from playing outside. Pa, Mama says dinner's almost ready and you need to wash up. Cole ruffled her hair. Yes, ma'am. Can't argue with your mama. Somewhere on the mountain, Dutch Ellis was checking his trap lines. But here in this small house built with honest labor and filled with honest love, Cole Mercer was finally truly home. And this time he knew exactly how to keep it. The years passed like water over stones, smoothing rough edges, carving new channels. Emma grew tall and strong. Married a good man from Silverton, gave Cole and Grace 3 grandchildren. Grace's sewing business prospered. Cole served as deputy for another 20 years before age finally slowed him down enough to retire. And now in March 1917, Cole Mercer sat on his porch at 73 years old, watching his grandson James prepare to go to war, and he understood that the story never really ends. It just gets passed down generation to generation like a river flowing toward the sea. That's the story, son, Cole said, his voice carrying across the years back to the present moment. That's what happened the day I stopped running and started living again. James sat silent for a long moment, his young face struggling to process everything he had heard. Finally, he spoke. Were you scared when you faced those 50 men? Terrified, Cole said honestly. But I did it anyway, because that little girl needed me, because doing the right thing mattered more than being safe, because sometimes a man has to stand up even when the odds say he should run. He reached out and gripped his grandson's shoulder. You're going to see terrible things over there, James, things that'll make you want to give up, want to quit, want to forget you ever believed in anything good. But I need you to remember something. What's that, Grandpa? That the darkness doesn't win unless we let it. That every act of courage, every choice to stand instead of run every time we protect the weak, Instead of joining us strong, that's us pushing back. That's us saying the world doesn't get to break us. James nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I'll remember. Good boy. Cole released his shoulder and settled back in his rocking chair. Now go on inside. Your grandmother's making supper, and she'll skin us both if we're late. James stood but paused at the door. Grandpa, I'm glad you grabbed that badge. I'm glad you saved Grandma, because if you hadn't, I wouldn't be here. Cole smiled, a real smile that reached all the way to his eyes. Me too, son. Me too. James went inside and Cole sat alone with the fading light and the memories of a day 30 years gone that had changed everything. Somewhere in the house, he could hear Grace laughing at something Emma had said, could hear his grandchildren playing, could hear the sound of family and life, and all the things he had thought lost forever. The noose had swung empty in the wind waiting, but Cole Mercer had grabbed his badge and stopped the execution, had followed the evidence and fought the corruption, had built a home that stayed instead of one that burned. And in the end, that was all any man could hope for, to leave the world a little bit better than he found it, to protect the weak when the strong came calling, to remember that doing the right thing mattered even when the cost was high, especially when the cost was high. The sun dipped below the mountains, and Cole Mercer, former deputy husband, father-grandfather, closed his eyes and let the peace of a life well lived settle over him like a blanket. Tomorrow, James would board that train, would go off to fight in a war that would test him in ways Cole could only imagine. But tonight, they were all here together, all safe, all loved. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.